Because Taryn, you and I are both in comms and PR, and we pay such close attention to brands and the brands that are doing it well and the brands that perhaps need a little bit of help.
Woo! And there's some brands that can get some help.
There are, for sure. I have no doubt we see them probably far quicker than anyone else.
Yes.
I'll kick it off with a brand that I think is doing it well. So The Gap. I feel like they hired Zach Posen as their creative director, and that was a really smart decision because now all of a sudden you're seeing The Gap become more fashion. The silhouettes are stronger and softer as well. Their fabrications are different. And I just feel like The Gap has become super strong out there.
I think that's so interesting that you say that because you have a very good eye, right? Like you have a very close eye. So you notice these things. Do you think that the everyday consumer notices them?
I don't know if I bet you the everyday consumer doesn't even realize who Zach Posen is. But here's what happened to me. I went to The Gap, and there's not very many Gap stores anymore. And
Right.
I remember seeing a cardigan. I'm like, wow, I really like that. And it's soft. And I bought it. And then I went online, and I'm like, oh, and I like this, this, and this. And I bought that too. And I'm like, wow, I really, really like it. And then I Googled, and I realized that Zach Posen is the creative director. And I'm like, that makes sense. Because it's not like I've ever shopped at The Gap before. And so it made me want to learn and discover more. I don't think the average person knows who Zach Posen is necessarily.
Right.
I think what they probably have noticed is that they can take a dress off the rack at The Gap and probably wear it to a wedding. It's like the cut on his pieces right now are so good that it's like his jeans are amazing at The Gap.
I love that. Coming from South Africa, there was a huge aspiration to buy Gap clothing. Like growing up, I always saw it in magazines.
Aspiration.
Yes.
That's interesting.
It's interesting because I think sometimes when we think about brands, we think about them being aspirational brands that we can't afford or that we really love to purchase, but we just are not there yet. I'll give you another quick example. I don't know if you ever heard of the brand True Religion.
Oh yeah, I love True Religion. Yeah, they were very famous. Like
Really,
10 years ago,
they
right?
were really famous 10 years ago, and they actually came into our agency, and I was working with them in South Africa, and they were just such an edgy brand. They were so trendy, they were so edgy, but they were really expensive.
I remember Victoria Beckham, I believe, designed a capsule for True Religion. She was wearing them all the time.
She's actually amazing when you talk, and I mean, if we talk about brands, like she is really an incredible brand, just from, the Spice Girls to her own brand, but to everything that she has worked with branding. She also worked with Estee Lauder. She did a partnership with Estee Lauder.
She
and
did?
I met her actually in New York.
Love her.
Which was just such a fantastic experience because I took with me a publication. It was myself and a publication, and she had just launched a partnership with Estee Lauder, and Sarah Creel, actually, who now also has her own brand at Sephora for ageless consumers, which we can talk about later. But I met her, and she was so interesting, and she had just come back from a trip to Kilimanjaro, and I had been like following her on social media. And so when I met her, I said, I loved your trip to Kilimanjaro. And she had said in her socials that she had been to Africa, not Kilimanjaro. So at one stage, she looked at me and she was like, I'm sure she was thinking to herself, are you stalking me? And I saw her face, actually, and I said to her, no, I just recognized the landscape of like Kilimanjaro because of all the ash and the trees. It's very specific. But she's really a phenomenal brand. I mean,
Oh my God.
She's really reinvented herself over and over.
What was she doing for Estee Lauder? Because she's known for, remember, she did a capsule of True Religion, but then when she did her own collection, she basically copied that brand. So with Estee Lauder, I'd be curious, what did she do?
That's interesting because she worked with a partner at Estee Lauder when they created it, and that same partner went over and I think worked with her in her own collection.
I mean, I have to say her makeup, her eyeliner is pretty excellent. I don't love her skin products, but I do I trust her. You talk about a brand, a human brand.
Yes.
I trust her. I can't say that I necessarily love all of her fashion, but I feel like she's probably a good mom. She doesn't have to work, but she does. She's trying to build something. I think she's a good wife. Like, I think there's a lot of, and I thought that documentary
She
that
actually
Fisher Stevens did was pretty
and,
awesome
and she has
them.
she actually has quite a good sense of humor. Like she's quite funny. But you know, when you talk about makeup and you talk about the evolution of makeup and you talk about a brand, a really interesting thing for me, and it's very Canadianism, is Shoppers Drug Mart in terms of like their evolution with beauty from
Yeah,
their
that's
beauty
true.
boutique. Like if you think about the fact that you know they've never really housed luxury brands, and now over the last like 2 to 3 to 4 to 5 years, you'll
Yeah.
see Chanel there, Estee Lauder is there. Like it's amazing to see the growth of beauty at retail level, especially at Shoppers Drug Mart. I think they've done a pretty
Yeah.
phenomenal job.
I love to see that actually because I would say being Canadian, you want to support Canadian companies and Canadian brands.
Right.
And I do think that they've done a really great job. I like being able to go to the drugstore and buy luxury.
Yes.
And so I totally agree. I think one of the activations and that I think have been phenomenal that I've seen this year is actually yours. So
Oh,
you did that
thank you.
Estee Lauder. It was a package, and it said, "Let's get engaged."
Oh, right. Yes. That's interesting because, you know, that just talks about branding and finding an opportunity to resonate with the consumer. So I think in that instance, Estee Lauder's serum, Advanced Night Repair Serum, is the number one selling serum at night. People don't know they can use it during the day too, which they can. But when we think about, okay, it's such a saturated market, which you would well know, you know, in your industry too. How do you capture and engage consumers and influencers? And you know, a big story is like the influence of mailer boxes that they get now. They get so many boxes. So how do you break through that clutter? And because we celebrated World Sleep Day, which is that campaign that we did, you have to think of ideas that tie into sleep. Like how are you going to find something that you know, is going to create talkability for you on social, which ultimately grows your earned media value. And so we did a box for this World Sleep Day that said, get engaged this World Sleep Day. And when you opened it inside, it had a sleep ring, an advanced night repair, and it said, the perfect marriage between you and your skin.
Oh, that was great.
And I really loved it, actually, because the ring really determines like how much you sleep.
The Aura ring, right? Like the
Yes,
Sonora ring,
yes,
yeah.
kind of like the ring that you
Yeah.
get. But
Yeah.
I think the two thing is that if you haven't slept enough, you really need good products that make you look like you've had a good night's sleep. And it's a big
Nighttime
big
products
thing.
that I think that people don't realize that actually, sure, what you put on during the day matters, but it's actually what you put on at night that makes the biggest difference. I find it's my nighttime routine that actually makes more of a difference to my skin than what I do to my skin during the day.
You know, we often talk about like in Asia and Korea, they'll use a lot of products. They'll have like 5 or 6 or 7 steps in the beauty routine. But I think if you have 2 or 3 really great products at night, or one of which
Yeah.
really is our advanced night repair serum, which I promise you makes a huge difference because people buy it all the time. It's the number one selling serum, that little brown bottle. And a good moisturizer, it make a huge difference to your skin in the morning. Because I think now, and you and I in the comms industry and, you know, dealing with, you know, the influencer market and different clients and brands, we don't sleep enough. And we spend a lot of time on social. We spend a lot of time on
Yeah.
our screens. So, and it can be quite addictive, right? So you just...
I wake up in the middle of the night and my computer's right next to me. And if I can't sleep in the middle of the night, I turn it on and I start scrolling. That's what I do. And I'm okay with it.
Well,
My husband turns the other way. He's like, I don't want to see it.
I have to tell you something funny, actually. My husband always says to me, Taryn, if something happened to me and it disappeared for 3 days, you wouldn't even notice. You'd be like, but if I took your phone, you'd be like, where's my phone? Where's your husband? So
That's funny. You would notice. You would absolutely
well, maybe
notice.
after 3 or 4 days,
You
you
would
know,
notice.
be like, why is the laundry not done?
That's funny.
Why are the dishes not clean?
Another campaign I thought that was interesting, and they're a client of ours on. I thought what they did during the Super Bowl with Elmo and Roger Federer
Right.
was awesome. Because I have to say, before they were a client, I thought, like, you know, the On shoes, I thought it was a Q and a C. Like, it's like, it looks like a Q and it looks like a C. And I just thought it was, I loved how they leaned into that because I'm sure a lot of people were like, is that an
What does that
O and an
mean?
N?
Yes.
Is it a Q and a C? Like, what is it exactly? And so that ad was awesome because they leaned into, no, it's on. And I didn't realize this, but it's pretty awesome. Federer is an investor in the brand. And so, and actually he's made more money with that brand than he ever did being a tennis player. And so it's kind of neat, I think, how they leaned into him, how they leaned into the O and the N and the branding of it, and like the most comfortable shoe on the planet, I will say, and not just because they're a client, but they're really amazing.
That's actually a great shoe. My brother introduced me to it. But I think sometimes branding can also hit the overside where it's too smart
Yeah.
and too clever, and it can completely go over consumers' heads. So, for example, like if you spend time in retail or if you spend time in brands with different cultures, the consumers perceive them very differently.
Yeah.
Like in the UK, the humor is very different. It's like a very dry humor. So the brands, brands kind of like play into that. Whereas in Canada, and I've had to shift a little bit about how I think and how I do things, because sometimes I feel like people just don't catch the cleverness. Not that I'm saying I do clever campaigns. I'm just saying that sometimes you have to worry that something's really smart, but then does someone actually catch it? And I have noticed that sometimes I've done things here and I've really thought they were brilliant, and other people have come to me and said they're really smart, but some people just haven't like grasped what it is that I was trying to say. Like maybe I was trying to be too creative or too smart in that instance.
Well, it's interesting because timing plays a big factor in things, right? Because we were talking about this with Poppy. You look at Poppy as a brand that, they just sold it for $1.9 billion to
Unbelievable.
Pepsi. And so when she started that brand, their creative looked very different than it does now when they sold it.
Right.
And so I feel like if she started that brand 15 years ago, when people maybe weren't as health conscious, it might not have done well. And 10 years ago when she started it, it didn't have that same sort of pick up sort of ability. It's like it wasn't as colorful. You didn't get excited about like picking it up. Whereas like now when you look at Poppy at retail, it's the first thing that you see, and it feels so colorful.
And it's actually interesting when you look at like the before and the after, what it was and what it is now, especially like when it comes to flavor. So it's like all these consumer insights and these research that go into brands being successful. I mean, they have brands that have done things that have been detrimental to brands too, So for example, like a beer brand, if we look at what happened, I mean, probably won't name the beer brand, but they partnered with someone incorrect a few years ago, and that was detrimental to them in the sense where, okay, I mean, let's talk about it. It was bad, for example. They did a whole campaign, and perhaps they thought it may have worked, but it missed the audience completely.
It's very woke. I feel like you have to really think about like what's the ethos of a brand.
Yeah.
You can't just change it because the environment is changing. You have to really sort of think about like who's your audience and what do they care about. And you can't like just change that after years and years of sort of historical.
Yes.
I mean that was definitely a mistake. Or remember when Coke changed their flavor? They're like, this is the new Coke, and everyone's like, no, give me the old Coke.
Exactly, and that almost destroyed them.
The brand.
Exactly. I mean, I think they were talking about that this morning on the radio. Actually,
They were.
It's bizarre. Actually, I heard that on the radio that they were talking about that. But you can make these mistakes, and they can be detrimental to a brand. And I do think that there's importance in evolving and taking that next step and not necessarily modernizing, but still being traditional is important, but you can also overstep.
Well, strategically modernizing. I think sometimes what happens is new leadership comes in and they just want to change everything because they want to put their own sort of footprint on things. And I think that's often ego. And I think you have to take a step back and really look at who's our audience and how are they evolving so that you're tweaking as opposed to just changing everything. And Poppy is a good example of that because the product itself was great, but the packaging needed some adjusting because you wanted the outside to feel and taste as good as the inside, and it felt disconnected. And I mean, they made a big enough change that it was a $1.9 billion, change because I'm not sure that sale would have happened otherwise. So it's kind of awesome to see that and see a brand succeed so well.
Would you say that you're brand loyal? You buy the same thing? You you are brand loyal to specific brands?
I mean, I would say I'm consistent. I don't know if I'm brand loyal as much as I'm very consistent. Like I will say I love a Coca-Cola a day. Like I just do.
See, I knew we were best friends
Yeah,
from the
I love
start,
Coke.
right?
Yeah.
Because if you didn't love Coke, I may have to reconsider our relationship.
I
I'm
love
just
Coke.
saying.
I know. So I am brand loyal because I have to have a Coke a day, Coca-Cola. So when I come home, like I reach for a Coca-Cola, and if you gave me a Pepsi, in fact, to the point where Eric and I went to Zadoon. It's a beautiful Ritz-Carlton property in Cabo San Lucas in San Jose, and they've switched completely to Pepsi. But they know that I like Coke, so they filled our fridge with Coca-Cola because I'm like
Smart.
I can taste the difference between Pepsi and Coke, and I definitely am a Coca-Cola drinker.
100%. But, for me, when we look at brands, like we become so brand centric, like from the car we drive or from the shoes we wear or where we shop. And sometimes it makes it hard for newcomers to break into the market unless they really have something that's eye-catching.
But it's interesting because I always feel like when someone's starting a new brand, I don't think it's about trying to find something that's missing in the market. I think you can actually compete with something that's in the market. You just have to market it better.
Yes.
But know what that is. And so you look at Nyx as a really good example. It's not like we couldn't buy underwear out there, but it's
Right.
just the way she marketed Nyx. Or even you look at Skims with Kim Kardashian.
Yes.
Like we had Spanx already, but Kim just expanded that and made it, I guess, made it more acceptable, because with Spanx, it's like you didn't want anyone to know that you're wearing Spanx. Whereas with Skims, you're like, you don't mind people knowing that you're wearing something underneath your dress that just, makes you look a little bit tauter.
I think you should see me before I got into this outfit. Just saying, hashtag. But I think the interesting thing for me is that brands leverage a lot more when they have celebrity endorsement. I mean, it does make it easier to
Well,
market
it's about
a
the
brand.
numbers,
Yeah.
right? Because if you think about it, like the reason celebrity endorsement works is because Kim Kardashian has 300 million followers plus.
Yep.
Kylie Jenner, same thing. So when they come out with a makeup line or a clothing line, they don't need to advertise anywhere. They are already
They are the
they're
adverts, yes.
exactly. And so that's why we're seeing so many celebrity partnerships out there, because that is your advertising. And so even with Poppy, they did have, I think Olivia Munn was an investor. You look at some of these brands or like The Honest Company, that was Jessica Alba. It's not a coincidence that a lot of these brands that have a celebrity partnership, that they succeed, because they have the built-in numbers.
Would you say, in your opinion, that it's easier to support a brand that has longevity and tradition versus a brand new brand? What I mean by that is, like, you have a lot of heritage brands that, maybe new audiences don't necessarily understand the history. They don't necessarily understand the heritage or the power that they've had in the past, but they have to continue to keep evolving, versus new brands that come on the market that are quickly appealing for them.
I think it's easier for new brands. I do. I think it's easier for new brands, actually. I think I really appreciate a heritage brand, but I dig deep into a brand. I don't know if everyone does. I think that we live in a world right now that is so fast-paced and very surface that people don't dig as deep as you'd like them to. And so a heritage brand has to do a good job of
marketing themselves. And it's interesting because if you look at Sephora, right, who are really evolving and they're fast on the track, for example, like they have a lot of indie brands, and the indie brands are very successful. Versus, some of the traditional brands like ourselves, where we have to think and be different and be bolder and take creative steps, so that not only are we continuing to talk to our current consumer, but find new consumers.
Although I will tell you, and this is probably a good note to wrap this up on, I'd rather purchase Estee Lauder than like another celebrity makeup brand. I'm just really tired of like all of these celebrities that are starting makeup brands. Like it's one thing if it's a makeup artist that's starting a makeup brand,
Right.
but it's like do we need Selena Gomez? Do we need Lady Gaga? Like, do we need all of these celebrities to have a makeup brand? I'd rather them do a partnership with an Estee Lauder who really knows how to create something, as opposed to like just doing something on their own, which just feels to me like, okay, it's their management saying, okay, let's diversify your brand.
I just want to say that because you loved Estee Lauder, I'm going to send you Coke in a bottle now for the rest of your life.
Oh, thanks.